Hey guys, PretzelMan945 here. Welcome back to another video. I got a big one in this video. And that's because this video is my review of the greatest non-anime TV show I have ever seen, which is Hannibal. Um, this this is going to be an absolute beast of a review. To the point where I have done the rare thing, which I don't think I've done since my video on Mogni back in like September. And I have actually written down talking points, which is the closest that this channel will ever get to actually having a script for any of the videos. Excuse me. Um, I so um I really I cannot state how much I love this show better than repeating the fact that it is my favorite non-anime TV show of all time. Previously, that spot was held by Breaking Bad, and Breaking Bad still holds a strong number two, but Hannibal is far and away the number one best non-anime TV show I have ever seen. And we are going to talk about why. Um now I went back and forth on sort of um the format in which I wanted to um make this video, like the order of things I want to talk about. Um, I ultimately decided to go with a character focused approach. Um, checking and text a Discord message for a second there. So I decided to go with a character focused approach for this video. Um, However, before I get into that, I am going to give a brief overview of the premise of the show, some basic aspect of how I would rate it. Um, and then I am going to be going into spoiler territory. And for this video, I am issuing a rare spoiler warning because this show is just one of those pieces of media that you have to go into as blind as possible to truly get the um best and greatest experience that you possibly can out of it. So, therefore, I am issuing a spoiler warning now. I will make another declaration when I am about to start talking about the characters in depth and getting more into deep spoiler territory. Um, Now, Hannibal as a show is is based on the book The Red Dragon, which is a prequel to the book Silence of the Lambs, I believe. And of course, Silence of the Lambs is its own movie, which I have not watched yet. I plan to, but um, you can watch this show, to my knowledge, without um seeing either of those things. So basically, it is about a FBI special consultant named Will Graham. And he has this incredibly unique ability to go into a crime scene and sort of flashback as if he was the killer himself and reenact the crime scene in his head, and by doing so, solving cases of serial killers and um and and how they murdered people and stuff like that. Um and he is tormented by this fact. Um, he hates the fact that he can do it, and that's sort of the beginning and core for his character. And to help with these mental issues, he is sent to a psychiatrist named Dr. Hannibal Lecter, and the entire core of the show with only these serial killer mysteries as a pretext for the plot. The core of the show is following their dynamic, which I will talk about extensively. Um, the whole show I would probably rate like an 11 out of 10. I mean, I did say it's my favorite non-anime TV show of all time. It's my number 6 favorite piece of fiction. Um, I don't know when the next time will be that I'll make an updated video on that, but um that's where that ranks for now. It is number 6. Hannibal himself is my favorite villain in all of fiction, so something has indeed finally dethroned Thanos from that number 1 spot, though he's still an easy number 2. Uh, Despite the fact that Thanos held the spot for the previous 8 years, just about, ever since I first saw Infinity War in theaters. It's been 8 years. He had a long reign of dominance, but Hannibal now surpasses him at the number 1 spot. And the main character, Will Graham, is my number 3 favorite protagonist in all of fiction. Um, uh, okay. Seasonal ratings, I would give season 1 a 9, season 2 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10, all the positive ratings. Season 2 is by far the best and potentially the greatest season of television of all time. And season 3, I would give a very strong 8.5. Is that all the sort of municipal things? I believe that's all the sort of superficial ratings before I get really deep into the characters here. Um, okay. Now, this I am once again making the spoiler declaration. I am moving into spoiler territory now. If you have not seen the show and you have any intention to do so, then please leave the video now. It will always be here if you choose to come back to watch it. Which I hope you do. And now we are diving into the characters with the first one. I'm going to try and go in order from what I feel like is sort of least to most interesting characters. All the characters in this show are fascinating except for Freddie Lounds. Freddie Lounds is a fucking bitch and I hate her. That's all I'm going to say on her character because nothing else more needs to be said. Um, uh, so we're going to start with Dr. Frederick Chilton. Um, Chilton is a fascinating character because he is a man who goes after success at all costs, and it is the ultimate thing that ends up being the cost of everything else for him. Because he is so relentless in his pursuit of um fame and reputability and wanting to make his mental hospital like the biggest mental hospital on the block type thing. Um and see the way that him as a character just gradually devolves and suffers the cost of his attempts to get success is incredibly well done because even though he has incredibly brutal things happen to him, they never even really feel that deserved. Like to me, I wish the kind of stuff that happened to Chilton happened to Freddie Lounds. But unfortunately that didn't happen. Um, and so you just have him at the end of the show just being uh possibly the most unfortunate character in the entire show because he just relentlessly pursued fame and success that hard and got beaten down by the cost of it that hard as well. Um, so also, the way that this affects Chilton's relationships with um Will and Hannibal and even Jack to an extent. And like the way that for a little bit of time in season 2 he's accused of being the Chesapeake Ripper. Literally they went through everybody but Hannibal until the very end. um the way that like how that was the first sign of literally everything beginning to backfire for him. Like at the end of the show, you just feel really bad for the guy. Um, and so I think what they explored with his character across the course of the entire show was fascinating, and he's probably the most thematically consistent character across the whole show, which, you know, with a cast as um diverse as this, um that was a very loud text message. Goodness gracious. I have my phone on silent. Okay, well I do now. Anyway, with a cast as diverse and dynamic in their development as a bunch of these characters, it's nice that Dr. Chilton to me served as that consistent thematic core of a character amidst the rest of the cast. Very briefly, I'm going to touch on the other FBI agents, Kat and the other two who I don't remember the names of right now. Um, Kat, up through season 2 until she dies, was my favorite side character. That changes with season 3 with the development that other characters like Bedelia and Alana Bloom get, but we'll talk about them in a little bit. Um, I was answering the text. Um, so Kat, I thought was a very fun screen presence. Um, and she was often like I really liked the role and friendship that she had with Will, especially in season 2, when she was sort of the only one that tended to believe his story a little bit, even if she was semi doubtful. Like her slowly realizing that he was actually right about Hannibal was amazing. and her death was incredibly tragic. And the other two dudes, they're not particularly memorable, but they're sort of like the comedic relief, I guess. They have funny chemistry together, and they're fun to watch. Um, yeah, not much to say about them individually. Um, Very quickly, I'm going to touch on Francis, aka the Great Black, who is a character that appears only in the final arc of season 3, episodes 8 to 13, and I think that is he is a great example of this show's incredible talent to reset the status quo with its plot. And this is something I'm going to talk about a little bit more in detail when I get to the plot, specifically after I've talked about the characters for a very long time. Um, but Francis is a super interesting character despite the limited amount of time that he is introduced. The role that he plays, the way that he differs from other serial killers, and the way that he is ultimately connected to Hannibal and Will in the finale is fantastically done. I think that despite his limited screen time, he undergoes a lot of great development, including having emotional struggles and struggling with the identity of the Red Dragon itself and whether he has the right personality for it through the character of Reba, who I don't have written down, um uh, but she was a interesting character for that purpose, and their relationship was quite fucked up. But all the relationships in this show are very fucked up. Um, yeah, yeah, that wraps up my thoughts on that. Net characters I'm going to talk about are, I believe they were the Verstapos. Is that what they were called? Um, oh, Verger. The Verger is not the fucking Verstapos. I don't know where the hell I got Verstapo from. That's not anything. I don't know where that came from, but anyway, I'm going to talk about the Vergers. So, Max Verger is actually great for being even more of a thematic, consistent core than Dr. Chilton is, because even as consistent to his character as Dr. Chilton is, he still undergoes some changes in season 3, such as becoming more, I don't know how you would describe it, becoming more ruthless potentially, and yet still possessing a lot of the same character traits. But Mason Verger is basically the same throughout the entire thing. He's like this extremely just bad dude. Like, he is misogynist. He is like a complete he's completely insane. He's incredibly cruel. He has a ridiculous ego. He's meant to be just this very hateable dude, and he accomplishes that masterfully. Um, Margot, on the other hand, is a really interesting character in the way of how he strikes the balance between wanting independence, but also at the same time wanting to remain loyal. And this sort of struggle of loyalty versus independence makes her character extremely compelling. Especially regarding her relationship with Alana, which is just one of the most unique. It's probably the most unique relationship in the show. The fact that that ends up being a thing at all. But you know, as I'll talk about next, Alana is like the most unique character and one of the ones that goes through the most development in this show. But Margot as a character strikes this fantastic balance between um as I said, loyalty to her brother and her family name and what she believes her duty is, and also wanting to be independent. And that's where her desire to create her own son comes from, and that's why she uh sleeps with Will Graham. Um, so yeah, great character as well. Now Alana Bloom next. Alana starts out as a great friend to Will, um, who sort of changes as Will changes. It's fascinating how Alana acts as a parallel to Will in the way that when Will changes, Alana changes as well, but not in the same ways. They're very different characters and they change in very different ways, but the times at which they crucially change can be matched up with each other as if it's like mere points on a timeline. It's really good stuff. And so Alana begins to change over the course of like late season 1 to early season 2, where she begins to well for one thing in season 1 she becomes more concerned with Hannibal, not Hannibal, Zoyer. She becomes more concerned with Will, and then as he is sort of sitting in prison, she undergoes this fascinating change of initially like believing Will is innocent, um to and like taking care of his dogs and still trying to be a great friend to him, with what and then it changes to like he begins to doubt Will, and he doesn't and then like he begins to think that even if he didn't do all the killings, even if he wasn't the Chesapeake Ripper himself. um I just realized I also forgot to write down Abigail as a talking point, which would have been a major mistake to forget about that. But we're going to be talking about Alana for now. Um, Alana, after that point where even if she doesn't think that Will was actually the Chesapeake Ripper, then he begins to um like their once quite strong friendship begins to get very strained the more and more times that Hannibal is accused by Will, which causes Alana to side more and more with Hannibal until they eventually establish a much more physical connection by sleeping together, which is just such a disgusting thing when it happens. It just makes you go, "Oh no, come on," type thing. When that happens, um, and then Alana's most drastic character change by far, and her character stays pretty much the same throughout all of season 3, but uh, which I think is actually sort of necessary because uh the change that she undergoes in season 3 is genuinely that drastic because and this is the same thing with Chilton as well. Like, it's fascinating to me how in the beginning of season 3, both Chilton and Alana, but especially Alana, it feels like they sort of take on aspects of Hannibal's character that were present in season 2, which you seem to have fed off in the season 2 finale. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that more when I talked about Hannibal himself. But it's fascinating to me how, like, both those characters seem to absorb the aspects of Hannibal's character that he seems to head off, which are for Dr. Chilton a sort of sense of ruthlessness, I guess, like a uncompromising um what's the word I'm thinking of? And uncompromising is not right. Not the word I'm thinking of, but it's like an uncompromising seriousness in his desire to um uh to pursue his goals of success. And for Alana, it's this idea of he gains this sense of just utter cold and ruthlessness where he will do anything possible to manipulate a particular person to her ends. He sort of absorbs part of Hannibal's character in that way, and this is evidenced by the way that he manipulates Mason into sort of pushing him into a position that puts her in more power and allows her to help Margot. Which makes their relationship all the more unique, for the record, because it's amazing how this is a better way of putting it. Alana in season 3 really gains a sense of power, and he uses that power to be able to accomplish her own ends in a way that she didn't have the power of character to do before. And the way that she uses this to act as a symbol of loyalty that Margot can sort of pledge herself to that can still be related to her family but does not have to involve her brother makes their relationship just absolutely fascinating and really, really unique. Um, uh, yeah, very, very deep character in a while. Um, The next one I'm going to talk about is not as deep, probably won't take as long to talk about, but it's still a fascinating character nonetheless, especially over the course of season three in particular. Um, and that is Bedelia. Now, of course, that's not her actual given name, but I feel like it's the appropriate name to call her because of the way the prominent role that she plays in the beginning of season three and how that plays into her overall psychology by the end of the show particularly. Um Now she starts out as Hannibal's psychiatrist. So immediately we have the incredibly fascinating idea of a psychiatrist, Hannibal Lecter, being a psychiatrist, which is just such a unique and fascinating idea for a relationship in the first place, and it is executed so darn well because there there is like the senses of how Hannibal is like it feels like Hannibal is actually being a, a little bit genuine when he's talking to Bedelia, but in other ways it's blatantly obvious that that is not what he's doing at all. Um, and so as a result, his conversations with Bedelia are able to reveal a fascinating part of his psychology and it's an insight into how he thinks because the unique thing about Hannibal and Bedelia's relationship is the fact that even though the show calls it Bedelia is Hannibal's psychiatrist, in reality both of them are constantly psychoanalyzing each other at the same time. And Hannibal is doing this even more to her than she is to him. Um, and and this is evidenced with the way that he constantly brings up this hacker that he had, which is alluded to many, many times, though it's finally shown in in the end of season three, um, episode 9 or 10, if I remember correctly. Um, Maybe it was episode 8. It was one of those three episodes, I want to say. Um, and what this creates is this fascinating, like, sort of light L sort of dynamic where where it feels like they're constantly trying to outsmart one another, and yet it's not like a conscious thing. Well, it's much more conscious for Hannibal than it is for Bedelia, but both of them are sort of, in a sense, unconsciously psychoanalyzing each other constantly and therefore continually learning so much about both of their internal natures. And what this creates for Bedelia is this dark yet twisted fascination with Hannibal that comes from psychoanalyzing him because of the fact that she decides to run away with him to Italy. And there, in the beginning of season three, he sort of acts as his temporary plaything when Will Graham isn't there. Um, and over the course of the rest of season three, he develops more through the perspective of other characters because in the final episode of season three, he directly serves as Will Graham's protagonist, uh, psychiatrist, which is a fantastic payoff to the build up that had been established through seasons one and two and the rest and the first two thirds of season three in terms of how through Hannibal talking about Will, Bedelia at the same time as psychoanalyzing Hannibal, she was psychoanalyzing him, but also uh Will Graham at the same time through Hannibal. And the effect that that creates is fascinating, and the way it's contrasted with their direct conversations and how like certain things about Bedelia's psychoanalysis of Will through Hannibal prove correct and other things were not correct is just fascinating. Okay, I had to go get water. Um, I think I said everything that I want to say about Bedelia. Um, I don't know if I ended up talking about her longer than I wanted. I've lost track at this point. All I know is that this video is going to be stupidly long, but it's worth it because there's that much Pete to talk about. Um, okay, now Abigail. So Abigail is introduced very early in the show. Um, and Garrett Jacob Hobbs is sort of the haunting figure in Will's life, and Abigail is his daughter. So Abigail is then um developed into this fascinating character who represents um the uh I guess the trappings of misguided parenthood is how I would put it because both Will and Hannibal act as father figures to Abigail. And um and Hannibal in particular becomes more, I want to say, humane and caring of a person and devoted to those he loves through Abigail being within his life. And Will realizes that Will realizes the sort of value of family and what that can give him and the role that it plays. Um, and for Abigail herself, what having these two different dad figures does to her after losing her biological dad is it creates an extremely conflicted character who is constantly self-doubting her actions, um, is incredibly emotionally unstable and just never knows what the right thing to do is because he's always just a confused teenager. And that's what makes her character so compelling is the fact that she is consistently going through ridiculous emotional conflict. And the fundamental effect that he has on both Will and Hannibal as father figures and their father daughter relationships that she has with each of them is just beautiful. Now, the FBI agent of the hour, Jack Crawford, who, in my opinion, this is Lawrence Fishburne's greatest acting role of all time, and I really don't think anything else comes close. And we are talking about an actor that is already of legendary status and was legendary status in my mind before I even watched this show. Now this performance has cemented him probably as among my favorite actors of all time. Um, because his performance as Jack Crawford was just the best performance that he's ever done. Now, to talk about the character of Jack himself, Jack is this fascinating agent character where he will do anything to perceive his goals, pursue his goals because he believes that his goals are superior to everyone else's. He believes that he has the superior righteous motive and he will do anything to see his motive through and see his goals accomplished, even if it means burning his entire world around him and sacrificing everything and everyone that he cares about. And nowhere is this more clear than the case with his wife, because despite the fact that he loves his wife dearly and their relationship is amazing, he always finds a way to connect it back to his work. He always finds a way to connect to the bad things happening to his wife with the Chesapeake Ripper. And and it's not the first time he does this, because the very first time he does this is when he connects Miriam Lass to the Chesapeake Ripper and the idea of the Chesapeake Ripper in the first place, and he becomes obsessed with that idea. And then he does the same exact thing with his wife when his wife begins to like severely suffer from cancer. Um, and his constant desire to associate things with the Chesapeake Ripper and the way that he constantly has Jack on the not Jack. He doesn't have himself. I mean, he does have himself on the line situations, but I misspoke. The way he constantly has Will on the hook for things and uses Will as his personal pawn for everything and using Will as a force to accomplish his goals no matter what the cost or consequence at all is just and the way also that the most fascinating thing about Jack as a character to me is the fact that all the while he does all these things to see his motives and ideals realized and pursue his goals by any means necessary, even if it means burning everything around him and sacrificing everyone he loves and holds dear. The most fascinating part about Jack's character to me is the way that he is 100% completely um observant of it. Like he acknowledges every single act that he does. He acknowledges his obsession. He acknowledges his motives. He acknowledges how how his actions are obsessive and how they relate to his goals. He tells the people that he is burning that he is burning them directly and he doesn't really care. And the characterization of him being this self-aware agent character who literally throws everything on the line to pursue his goal and is openly aware and acknowledging of it the entire time to himself and everyone around him is just absolute masterclass in writing any kind of character. Because I think that there would already be a compelling character if he was delusional and denied all of it. But the fact that there is that additional layer of he is completely acknowledging of everything that he does just makes his screen presence like consistently the most captivating to follow. Like, even if the core of Hannibal as a show is the dynamic between Hannibal Lecter and Will Graham, that Crawford is the most central individual character of the entire show because of the way that he uses everyone and everyone seems to revolve around what he wants. Hence his whole relation to the whole God persona near the end of season three. And how he is like this godlike figure who takes all dominance and possession in the show. And just, he is such a fucking brilliantly written character that it is like hard for me to put into words beyond what I've just already said, which is already a lot of yapping. Okay. That was one of the big three down. Now we just have the core of the show left, Will and Hannah. Now, I didn't know whether to separate talking about their dynamic, um, like after talking about the characters, but I don't think that's something I can do. I think sort of have to talk about all three aspects at once. So Will starts out, as I explained in the brief premise, as a man who is haunted by his ability to reenact serial killings as if he was the one doing it to expand on crime scenes and solve cases. Um, and Hannibal, his psychiatrist, is a serial killer himself, but obviously is very hidden. Um, and it's very quickly revealed that Hannibal is this copycat killer who copies Garrett Jacob Hobbs and who is also the one who copies um every other serial killer, basically, and like has this extreme admiration for psychopaths and serial killers because he is one himself. And he begins to have an interest in Will Graham, which eventually turns into a fascination and then into a straight up obsession and then a it ends with being the most twisted kind of love imaginable, in which he wants Will to be by his side and he is trying to manipulate Will to make that outcome happen in any way possible. And Will is like completely dancing to Hannibal's tune to the point where Hannibal gets him falsely framed and locked up in jail for Hannibal's own crimes at the end of season one. And then, while Will is in prison, it's so interesting what the beginning of season two does with the show, because season one does this immaculate job of establishing Will and Hannibal's dynamic to be exactly as I described. And then while Will is in prison, Hannibal sort of takes Will's place in that he obviously can't do the same thing that Will can, no one can, but he takes Will's place in the way that he becomes this psychological profile special consultant for the FBI on killings that he did himself, which is just this insane level of twisted, which is quite hard to comprehend, and yet it's fucking genius. Um, so he ends up taking on this direct role of being being the the thing that Will did while Will is in prison. And while Will is in prison, um he himself begins to absolutely hate Hannibal. And he wants him dead more than anything. Which he mentions multiple times, and this is what causes Alana to essentially go over to Hannibal's side. Um, to the point where the both of them nearly have each other killed. Um, Hannibal through the dude with the bear claws, and Will through the creepy dude in the mental hospital that Will is imprisoned at. And this, in my opinion, especially after having finished the show and reflecting on everything that happened, this is the critical turning point for both characters, because what happens here after both of them fail to kill the other is they are now evil. And what this creates, I'm going to start with Will. What this creates from Will's perspective is interest in Hannibal. And this is the most genius part of the storytelling that this show does in terms of the way that it resets the status quo. And what I mean by that is it gives the situation where the viewer obviously knows that so much change has happened, and yet the show frames the certain circumstances of the situation as if nothing has changed, which creates this incredible dichotomy. Uh, is that a word? Hold on. Dichotomous, that's the word I'm thinking of. It creates this incredible dichotomous effect where um Will begins to uh have an interest in Hannibal, and which is obviously a major change, and yet it is framed again as this thing where um as this thing where um I'm trying to find the word. It's already at 56 minutes. This is this is a very very long video. It's probably gonna go over an hour. It gets to this point where you know, Will begins to have this interest in Hannibal, and yet the situation is framed to where they are see Will is seeing Hannibal for normal counseling appointments, like as happened in the beginning of the show. And um and this and the way the show does this is the most brilliant aspect of its storytelling because it creates this amazing I'm gonna probably repeat myself a little bit here, but that's because I sort of lost my train of thought in the middle of what I was trying to say. It creates this mode of storytelling creates this incredible dichotomous effect with how the viewer knows what things are changed, and yet the situation in which it is framed has not changed, which um, creates this incredible contrast, uh, and it just leads to such depth of characters for both Will and Hannibal. Um, and then, that was Will's perspective is the fact that he begins to take an interest in Hannibal himself, and he begins manipulating Hannibal to his own ends, which is the exact opposite of what was happening throughout all of season one. And then Hannibal, his perspective is that he sort of thinks that he went in too deep, as in he let his interest with Will get too far. And yet, before he knows it, he is into deep because he begins to form an outright obsession with Will, which is what allows Will to manipulate Hannibal like a damn puppet, just like Hannibal did to Will in season one. And so you have this incredible inverse dynamic. And then, of course, we get to the season two finale, Mizumono, which is, in my opinion, the greatest episode of television ever made. Because it is, because, I said that Hannibal fought, that Will manipulated Hannibal like a puppet. That's only to a certain point. Eventually, Hannibal is able to stop himself. And what this creates is the setting of the season two finale where Jack, once again, just purely fueled by his obsession and his will to push his dominance through, uh, goes to kill Hannibal, and Will, who who has this incredibly conflicting nature because he was trying to manipulate Hannibal to his and Jack's end so they would be able to catch him. That was the whole point. He ultimately succumbs to his own obsession because by manipulating Hannibal himself, he subsequently took his own interest in Hannibal to another straight up obsession. And and except the difference is Will is not able to realize that he is in too deep because of the fact that his mind is of weaker strength than characters like Hannibal and like Jack, which causes him to be manipulated. So therefore, unlike Hannibal, he is not able to realize when his obsession went too far. And and so as a result, it leads to a situation in the season two finale where Hannibal ends up again on top due to the fact that Will ends up letting Hannibal know that Jack is coming and that they know um and he ends up going to Hannibal's house where he has that final confrontation with him uh and then Abigail reappears again, which is like the uh I can't even say it's the most insane plot twist in the show or even in that episode, to be honest. But it's an absolutely ridiculous plot twist that has brilliant build up and payoff. Um, and it plays into the misguided parent thing that I talked about with Abigail earlier. Um, and the way that like everything wraps up with the whole teacup analogy and stuff like that, and how that is the ultimate configuration and analysis of every part of their relationship is just fucking spectacular. Like I'm running out of words to describe how good it is. All these aspects of the best dynamic in fiction. And then we go into season three. And season three, the start of it is fascinating because both characters are like they were so obsessed with each other to a point where the beginning of season three feels like both of them are going through withdrawal from heavy drug. And obviously the drug was their obsession with each other. Will in terms of he like he just can't really come to terms with Abigail's death and is seeing hallucinations of her and And that kind of thing is not able to be solved until um he meets Hannibal again. And on Hannibal's perspective, he is using Bedelia as his own, like, he treats her as basically less than human, and and like his own personal manipulative plaything, but he knows it is never satisfying enough because Bedelia is not Will Graham, and no one can take the place of Will Graham in that way. Um, and and his frustration with this is shown in the way that, despite the fact he has this uh profile in Florence, like he managed to create a new identity in life for himself, he blows it by becoming incredibly, like, all the more reckless and risky and openly blatant with the killings that he's doing. He's doing completely different styles, which aren't mimicking any other serial killer. He's just doing different of his own things, which creates a unique style. And he's leaving the bodies blatantly out in the open. He's blatantly doing the killing without, like, any subtlety at all, which just creates this um incredible view into his and Will's psychology, with the way that it shows them being so obsessed with each other, like knowing how their withdrawal from each other affect both um characters individually, and it is absolutely a massive strength of the beginning of season three. Probably the biggest strength, if anything. Um, and also a little tangent about Jack, real quick. Um, Jack again proving the brilliancy of the way that he's written, because he doesn't go to Italy to get Will Graham out of concern for his safety. He does it because he needs Will Graham to further pursue his goals. So, like, that being kept consistent in season three is just brilliant to me. Um, and also, like, you know, the utter beating that the two of them have in Mizumono, and the way it's followed up in season three, episode five, where Jack just beats the absolute shit out of Hannibal and nearly kills him, and the way that that is given further context both times near the end of season three by framing Hannibal as the devil and Jack as God is just fucking brilliant. Like, they have such a incredible rivalry dynamic. Um, but side note about Jack over. Um, and so when they are finally able to find each other again, even though they don't actually make contact, they can, like, hear each other's voices because they're in the same location in Florence. Like, the peak of the fact that Will is always going to be the one with the weaker mind, and the one that ultimately always puts Hannibal in the position of power, is the fact that he says, "I forgive you" to Hannibal, which is just which is like one of the most monumental moments for Will's character in the entire series. And then you know, after everyone gets back in the US, and Hannibal surrenders himself, then we have the time skip to the final arc of the show. And and again, this is another fucking brilliant example of resetting the status quo. Um, where we once again put Hannibal in the position of being the evil mastermind, except it's a crucial difference this time. The crucial change is a lot more obvious in the fact that he is in prison. But Will's character is sort of reset in one way. Uh but this doesn't end up materializing for very long. But he ends up sort of reset a little bit in the way that his character his character his character like hates Hannibal again. His character refuses to go near Hannibal because he knows that Hannibal is a bad influence and he knows what would happen due to the previous experiences of his obsession with Hannibal. And yet, he ultimately cannot resist. And okay, it's partly the fact that he is um like he cannot resist the temptation of the devil, so to speak, of Hannibal. But it's also, I should point out, it's very keen to understand that's only one half of it. The other half is the fact that as Will is the lamb that does every word of God's bidding, it means that he was uh once again unable to resist the uh allure and temptation of crawling back to Jack to once again do his bidding and help Jack pursue his goals and motives. And Jack in this regard just just like is it becomes fully complete as a character to me, and it's just absolute master class in writing. Um and on Hannibal's side, um he sort of um he realizes through the rest of season 3 that despite the fact that at the end of season 2 he believed that he had resolved his obsession with Will, it becomes very obvious to him that it is not the case. And so therefore, even more than ever before in the whole series, he becomes hell bent on twisting Will to his desires and goals. And so as a result, Will is being doubly puppeteered by both Jack the God and Hannibal the Devil, and he is suffering the blowbacks from both aspects of control. And And obviously, because of his previous experiences and the fact that um his ultimate temptation with the devil and obsession with Hannibal will ultimately always win out over his devotion to God. That is like the true tragedy of Will's character, is the fact that he was never able to number one, have agency for himself, but at the very least do the bidding of the one that he knew was slightly more right. Um, the ultimate tragedy of Will Graham's character, and such a brilliant one at that, which is why he's my number three protagonist in fiction, is that um he is ultimately unable to uh um not be able to succumb to the influence of the devil and his obsession with Hannibal, and it leads to uh obviously in the finale of the show, uh Francis is the one that ultimately breaks both of them out, uh because he wants to meet Dr. Lecter and stuff like that. But the two of them are able to escape regardless, and there, like, Will just basically fully gives in to Hannibal, and once again, this idea of their uh power dynamic is very evident in the final frame where they embrace each other and embrace and accept their obsessions for each other fully, with Hannibal being the one in the more dominant position there before they both uh, die off the cliff. Die in quotation marks because it's sort of implied that they don't actually die at the end. But that's up to interpretation. Sort of like the finale to Stranger Things. And I hope I think that I have done one of the best jobs that I have ever done in one of my videos in terms of explaining literally fucking everything that I thought and had to comment on. So hopefully this made for a good review and analysis of Hannibal. I believe that I did my opinions of the characters justice. If you not think so, then please let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think of Hannibal as well, um, as a show. Uh, and if you watched any part of this insanely long video, the longest review I've made in fucking ages, and one of the longest reviews I've probably made ever, if not the longest. Um, Actually, we're not even done. We're not even done. Oh my gosh. We're not even done because there's more stuff to talk about that isn't the Will Graham dynamic. These will be relatively quick points. I actually think that I've mostly talked about how I love the genius of the plot and the whole like resetting the status quo thing. But I'm going to talk about it just a little bit more, um because like the way that the show uses this form of storytelling as an essential aspect of the storytelling is just, it's something I've never really seen another piece of media do before, and I don't think I'll ever see a piece of media do it as well as Hannibal does in creating these incredibly unique and complex dichotomous situations between a um a thing that looks similar and a and like the viewer knowing what is changed about that situation. Um, Also, straight up, this is just a very minor point. This show has the best cinematography of any piece of media I have ever seen, and it is not fucking close. Because, um, because just the amount of completely insane and trippy shots and crazy camera angles and everything like that are just peak. Also, this TV show has the best lines of and scenes of dialogue in all of fiction. Basically, every single scene between Will Graham and Hannibal Lecter is it has dialogue almost as deep as like being worth analyzing an entire fucking Shakespeare play. Um, yeah, just this show is fucking peak fiction, and I hope that I have explained it well. I think I've done a pretty damn good job of explaining it very well. Um, this is my number six piece of fiction. This is my favorite non-anime TV show of all time. Um, and yeah, uh, if you watched any part of this insanely long review, this has got to be the longest review I've ever done, by the way. If there's one longer than this that is on my channel I'm forgetting about, I will be quite stumped. um, but yeah, that's gonna do it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you watched even 5 seconds of it, and I will see you later. Bye bye.